My phone lit up at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday, 2 nights before my wedding. I was standing in the break room of the Harlow County 911 Dispatch Center, halfway through a cold cup of coffee, reviewing the night supervisor's incident log before I handed off the floor. Quiet shift, a fender bender on Route 9, one welfare check on the east side, the usual hum of a county that goes mostly right. I looked down at the screen. One message, from Tessa. If my ex doesn't attend the wedding, I'm not showing up either. I read it once. Then I read it again. Not because the words were complicated. Because I wanted to be sure I had them exactly right, word for word. No room for interpretation. Because in my line of work, misreading a situation costs people something they can't get back. I put the phone in my pocket, finished the handover, said goodnight to the overnight team, and drove home. My name is Nolan Price. I'm 36 years old. I've worked in emergency dispatch for 11 years, the last 3 as a senior shift supervisor at Harlow County 911. People hear that job title and picture someone pushing buttons. The reality is that I manage a team of 12 dispatchers who take calls from strangers in the worst moments of their lives, and my job is to make sure those calls go right. Fast, accurate, no panic bleeding into the line. You learn things doing that job for over a decade. You learn that most people say exactly what they mean when they're under pressure. You learn the difference between someone asking for help and someone making a demand. And you learn, very quickly, that calm is not the same as passive. Calm is a choice. A trained, deliberate one. I had been with Tessa Vale for 2.5 years. We met at a work fundraiser. She volunteered with a literacy nonprofit that partnered with the county. She was a dental records coordinator at a mid-sized clinic downtown, organized to the point of being impressive. The kind of person who remembered your birthday and your coffee order and the name of your dog's vet. She made me laugh on our first real date and apologized for laughing too loud, and I told her that was the worst thing she'd said all night. We were good together. At least, I thought we were. I proposed 14 months in. No grand gesture. Just the two of us at a lake outside the city. A ring I'd picked with some help from my Aunt Carol, and a question I already knew the answer to, or thought I did. She said yes before I even finished asking. The wedding was set for Saturday. A restored farmhouse venue called Whitmore Grounds. Old stone walls, outdoor ceremony space, string lights through the oak trees. 107 guests confirmed. Catering finalized. A string trio booked. And a honeymoon. 10 nights in the Amalfi Coast. I had spent 5 months planning it. Extravagant. Non-refundable. Every private dinner, every coastal excursion, every night in a cliffside villa, locked in months ago. I had already packed my bag. So when I read that text at 11:52 p.m., in a dispatch center break room with a fluorescent light flickering over my head, something settled in my chest. Not anger, not hurt, just a stillness that felt familiar, the kind that comes right before a decision that doesn't need to be debated. I knew who Rowan Callis was. Tessa had mentioned him exactly twice in 2.5 years. Once, early on when she described an ex who had been complicated, she didn't elaborate and I didn't press. And once, about 5 months ago, when she casually mentioned he'd sent her a message out of nowhere, she called it weird and said she didn't respond. I believed her. I had no reason not to. But the name in that text wasn't Rowan Callis, old memory. It was Rowan Callis, condition. If he doesn't attend, or she won't show up. I sat at the kitchen table when I got home. The apartment was quiet. Her jacket was draped over the chair near the door. She'd been here earlier. I left it where it was. I picked up my phone and typed one word. Deal. Sent. Phone face down on the table. She called 4 times in the next 20 minutes. I didn't answer, not out of anger. I just already knew the shape of that call. I'd heard versions of it before. On the job, from people trying to walk back something they'd said under pressure. I didn't mean it like that. You're taking it wrong. Just hear me out. And maybe sometimes that's true, but the text didn't read like a slip. It read like a position she'd already decided on. I went to bed. Friday morning, I started making calls. Whitmore Grounds first. The venue coordinator picked up at 7:20 a.m. I told her the wedding was canceled. She asked if I wanted to reschedule. I said no. She confirmed the deposit terms. I accepted them. Clean, 30-second call. Catering, 1 call, 7 minutes, done. The string trio. I sent an email at 7:41 a.m. professional, brief, apologized for the short notice, offered to cover a cancellation fee if needed. Then I sat down and drafted a message to the full guest list. Short, no explanation, no detail. Nolan and Tessa's wedding this Saturday has been canceled. We apologize for any inconvenience. No further information will be shared. I sent it from my personal email at 8:09 a.m. Then I called the resort in Italy. The reservation was in both our names. I asked to have Tessa Vale removed. Keep the booking. Single occupancy adjustments where needed. The concierge said, "Of course, Mr. Price. I'll update the account right away." I thanked her and hung up. By 8:25 a.m., the wedding was gone. By 8:30, Tessa's mother had already called 5 times. Her name is Donna Vale. We had a cordial relationship. Not warm, not cold. The specific kind of polite that exists when someone is deciding whether you're good enough without ever saying it out loud. I drove her to a specialist appointment once when Tessa was traveling. I brought her a birthday card every year without being reminded. She never fully settled into trusting me, and I had made peace with that. Some people take longer. I did not answer her calls. I opened my messages a little after 9 and saw it. 64 unread texts. Most from Donna. A cluster from Tessa's older brother, Wade. 2 from a cousin I'd met at a holiday dinner once. And then a long, unbroken chain from Tessa herself. Starting just after 8, running back to back without pause, the way messages look when someone realizes something has already happened and they can't catch up to it. I scrolled through without responding. Donna's messages were loud even in text. "How dare you do this? You've humiliated this entire family." Tessa did nothing wrong. You owe her an apology. You owe us an apology. The venue. The deposits. What kind of man does this? Tessa's were different in tone, but not in direction. The first several were confused, then urgent, then explanatory. She cycled through them fast. And around message 18, she landed on the sentence that I'd been expecting. Rowan was only coming for closure. Closure. I've heard that word used a lot of ways. Sometimes it's honest. A clean ending to something that never got one. I don't doubt that. But sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's the word someone uses when what they actually want is access. To a feeling. To a person. To something they've told themselves they've let go of, but haven't. She said Rowan was only coming for closure. What the text said was, if he doesn't attend, I'm not showing up either. Those are not the same sentence. One is personal and quiet. The other is a condition placed on a wedding. I put my phone in my pocket and went to work. I said nothing to my colleagues that day about any of it. A few of them knew about the wedding. Dispatch centers are small, and people notice when someone takes 2 weeks off in the same month. Nobody pushed. I ran the floor the way I always did. Reviewed the overnight logs. Briefed the afternoon team. Handled a shift conflict between 2 of my senior dispatchers. Around 3:45 p.m., I got a text from a number I didn't have saved. It turned out to be Diane Fossey. The event coordinator Tessa had hired separately to handle the rehearsal run of show, the ceremony timeline, and seating logistics. I'd met her once at the venue walkthrough. She was thorough, professional. She had sent every update directly to Tessa, who passed along what she wanted me to see. Diane texted to ask if I had received the final seating chart. I told her I hadn't. She sent it. I opened the PDF in the break room and scrolled through the table assignments, color-coded, labeled. Tessa had clearly spent real time on this. I found the family table. Table 1, front left, prime placement. Seat 1, Nolan Price. Seat 2, Rowan Callis. Seat 3, Tessa Vale. I read that 3 times. Then I kept scrolling. My Aunt Carol, my father's only sister, the woman who took me in for 2 years after my parents separated, who had already flown across the country for this wedding, who is a widow, and who I love without condition, was placed at table 12. Back corner, against the wall, beside a column. I closed the PDF. I sat there for a minute, then I called Diane. She answered quickly. I asked when she received the seating chart. She said Tessa had sent it to her directly, privately, 3 weeks ago. She had assumed I'd reviewed and approved it. When I told her I hadn't seen it at all, she went quiet for a second. I'm sorry, she said. I should have confirmed with both of you. I assumed. I told her the wedding had already been canceled and thanked her for sending the file. She said there's one more thing. I waited. Diane said that Tessa had submitted a special music request, a specific instrumental piece to be played before the first dance, separate from the ceremony program. Something Diane described as not a standard wedding piece. She had looked it up after Tessa sent the title, and it was a recording tied to a specific performance space, the kind of thing with personal history attached to it. She didn't know the full story. But she said that when she asked Tessa about the timing, Tessa told her the song needed to play before the formal program began, and that it needed to play while Rowan was already seated at the table. I thanked Diane and ended the call. I stood in the break room with the fluorescent light buzzing and the radio running in the background, and I let the full shape of it come into focus. Not a guest list disagreement, not last-minute nerves, something that had been designed. A seating arrangement that put her ex beside her at the family table, not at a regular guest table, the family table, while my aunt was quietly moved to the back. A private song, timed to his presence, and a text that was built to force my hand, to make me either fold publicly or become the problem. If I had said nothing, if I had let it go, shown up Saturday, smiled at the altar, Rowan would have been in seat 2, the song would have played. And somewhere in that room, Tessa would have been watching his face to see if she felt something. I would have been standing at the altar while she ran a test on her own heart. I had canceled the wedding before any of it could happen. But I still didn't know what she was actually looking for. That answer came Saturday morning. I was already at the airport, boarding in 40 minutes, when Rowan Callis called me. I don't know how he got my number. I didn't ask. I picked up because I didn't recognize the area code and had been half expecting a call from the resort. "This is Rowan," he said. "I think we should talk." His voice was calm, a little flat, not defensive. I said, "Okay." He didn't make excuses. He said that when the cancellation emails went out Thursday morning, and Tessa started calling him in a panic, he started putting things together that hadn't fully made sense before. He said he hadn't understood what he was walking into, he thought it was a complicated situation, he hadn't asked enough questions. Then he said it. She told me she needed to see my face one last time before choosing the safe future. I didn't say anything for a second. The safe future. He said Tessa told him she wasn't certain, that she needed a moment, the wedding, the room, all of it, to find out if being near him still registered as something real. And if it didn't, she said, she'd know she was making the right choice. I asked him when she told him this. He said 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. While we were reviewing menu options together. While I was coordinating airport transfers and making sure my aunt had a good seat at the family table. 3 weeks ago, she was negotiating the terms of a test. I asked Rowan if he thought that was okay. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, I didn't handle it right. I'm sorry." I told him I didn't hold him responsible, that I meant that. He sounded relieved. We hung up. I boarded with 10 minutes to spare. The safe future. I sat with that phrase for a while, somewhere over the Atlantic, watching the clouds flatten out below the wing. I understood what she meant by it. I always had been the stable one, the one who doesn't raise his voice, who shows up when he says he will, who doesn't manufacture crises. That's not a performance. That's just how I'm built. Years of dispatch work will do that to you. You stop treating every fluctuation like an emergency. But somewhere along the line, Tessa had started reading that steadiness as a limitation, not as something to trust, as something to test against. She wanted to know if she was settling for safe. And her answer to that question involved Rowan in seat 2, a private song cued to his presence, and a threat designed to get him through the door. I wasn't angry about it anymore, sitting on that plane. I was just clear. There's a version of this where I call her back, where I argue my case, where I explain, line by line, what the seating chart meant, and what the song meant, and what the text at 11:52 p.m. really said. Some people would do that. Some people need to be heard. But I had spent 11 years in a room where other people's emergencies were my responsibility, and I had learned this. You cannot talk someone out of a decision they've already made with their gut. You can only decide what you're going to do with the information. She said if my ex doesn't attend the wedding, I'm not showing up either. I said deal. I meant it. And by the time my flight landed, the wedding was canceled, the image her family had been building for months was in pieces, and the man she'd arranged to sit beside her at the family table had called to apologize to the groom. The resort was everything the photos promised. White stone, a terrace facing the water, the kind of view that makes you stop in the doorway and not say anything for a second, because there's nothing that needs to be said. I had dinner outside on the first night, fresh pasta, a glass of something cold. The sun dropping behind the cliffs, turning the water orange and then purple and then dark. Number 64, unread texts, no seating chart, no Rowan Callis in seat 2. Just the extravagant, non-refundable quiet I had paid for, and now, unexpectedly, had entirely to myself. Back home, Donna's message campaign backfired quickly. She had forwarded parts of her text to mutual friends, trying to frame me as the one who had panicked and walked away over nothing. But the seating chart was real. Diane had it. The music request was documented, and Rowan, who had no reason to lie and every reason to stay quiet, didn't stay quiet. When guests started asking questions, and they did, because 107 people don't just absorb a cancellation email and move on, Tessa had no clean answer, because every answer led back to the text, and the text led back to the seating chart, and the seating chart led back to what she had told Rowan 3 weeks before the wedding. The safe future, that phrase traveled fast once it was out there. And once it was, the story Donna had been trying to tell. Poor Tessa, unstable Nolan, overreaction, cruelty, humiliation, couldn't hold its shape anymore. Tessa left me a voicemail on day 4 of the trip. She said she'd made a mistake, that she just needed me to understand what she had been going through, that it wasn't what it looked like. I listened to it once, standing on the terrace with a coffee in my hand. Then I deleted it. Because here's the truth. I did understand what she was going through. She was uncertain. She was looking for confirmation. Those are human things. I don't hold the feelings against her. What I hold against her is the method. She didn't come to me and say, I'm not sure I'm ready, or I've been struggling, or even I need more time. She built a stage. She positioned Rowan at her side and arranged a private song and issued an ultimatum designed to either force my compliance or give her a reason to walk. And then she called it closure. The thing about my job is that you learn to hear the difference between what people say and what they mean. Tessa said she needed closure. What she meant was she needed to know she wasn't making the wrong choice. And she wanted to find out at my expense on what was supposed to be our wedding day in front of everyone we knew. I accepted her ultimatum exactly as written. She chose her condition. I chose my response. And somewhere over the Tyrrhenian Sea, with no one in the seat beside me and nowhere to be for 10 days except present, I realized that some deals are actually worth the price you pay to close them. Here's what this story is really about. Knowing the difference between someone who loves you and someone who is using you as a measuring stick for someone else. Tessa didn't test Rowan, she tested Nolan, and Nolan passed not by fighting for the relationship, but by refusing to audition for it. You don't prove your worth by tolerating conditions. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is just say deal and mean it. If this one hit close to home, drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them, and if you're new here, hit subscribe before you go. New stories drop every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.